So my request is you guys have a WhatsApp group. You discuss among yourselves and propose a date for the exam. I'm okay with administering
Sir,
it on any day. Okay.
sir,
So
good morning,
let us
sir.
not. Good morning, Abhimanyu. Tell me.
No, sir, I'm Dinesh, sir.
Dinesh, yes, tell me.
Sir, actually, he has discussed in the class regarding 30th. Sir, then we
30th, is
all
it?
are, yes, sir, actually 30th there is no exam, so all we are ready with that.
30th is. Let me just check. Uh, just a moment. 30th is Saturday, right? So you wanted to have it on Saturday, is it? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I will think about it then. So 30th, anything earlier? I mean, I would like to finish it earlier if it's possible. So maybe that.
Sir, in earlier case,
Hello.
sir, maybe sir clash with some exams, sir, because all are somewhere some exams will be there. That is the issue, sir, with earlier. So if later there is no exam, 29th is the last day. So that's why we thought
Okay.
okay, 30th will be okay. Because any person may have some exam because all are scheduled now continuously.
Ah,
So
okay.
that's why
So
we
is
thought that
all right. So is 30th okay with everyone? Yeah. If someone has issues with 30th, may please speak up. Okay. So I see that everybody seems to be okay with 30th. So we shall have it on 30th. So we shall have it's a 3-hour exam. So it will be from 10 a.m. till 1 p.m. on 30th. Okay. So please mark your calendars. And the midterm, the second midterm would be this Saturday. That would be 60. And starting time will again be 10 a.m. So, but it will be a 1.5 hour examination. So 10 a.m. to 1:30 is going to be the exam. Okay, sorry, 10 to 11:30. 10 to 11:30 would be the exam this Saturday. That will be the second midterm. And on 30th January we will have the final exam between 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Okay, all right. Yeah. So let us get started with
Hello, sir.
any other. Yes. Hello.
Hello, this is Subhadeep, sir.
So Pradeep, tell me.
Yes, sir, on the midterm, sir, the syllabus is full, full syllabus up to the class.
No, the second syllabus, yeah, the syllabus for the second midterm would be the stuff that was covered after, the first midterm. So whatever syllabus you had for the first midterm will be part of the syllabus for the second midterm. So the second midterm syllabus starts with linearization of nonlinear differential equations, state space, and then so on and so forth. Okay, and the upper limit is whatever has been given in the homework. Again, the latest homework number 9 that I have given you. Whatever is contained in that is about as much as I'm going to ask you guys in the midterm. Okay, so it will not contain any of the material that was covered already in the previous, in the previous midterm. Okay, so even Rangekutta and so on. Although it was not, I mean, I did not ask any questions on Rangekutta in the first midterm. I still consider that to have been already covered in the first midterm because class where I discussed numerical solutions of differential equations occurred before the first midterm. Okay, so whatever I have taught after that exam, after the first midterm examination, is all that I'm going to be quizzing you on in the second midterm. Okay.
Sir, the homework 9 actually, sir, its due date is 25th, and there is continuous another homework is 8, which is also due. Sir, and our request is if you just decrease one homework syllabus, it will be better because within this short time it is very difficult to complete those homeworks.
Oh, you want me to? I can cut one homework, but then you will suffer the consequences of it in the final. Okay, if you are not able to answer questions on root locus and Bode plots and so on, then you shouldn't come and complain to me, Subhadev.
No, sir. Actually,
The
means
whole purpose of the homework is for you to practice practice solving problems. Okay.
No, sir. Actually, our concern is means we have discussed in the WhatsApp group that our concern is, sir, if you decrease the syllabus of that second midterm, no, so it will be better. Means if just one homework is due on 25th, so we'll be by covering that by 25th, and we will be able to able to go for the final exam, that homework 9. So that part, if you just cut out from that midterm 2, it will be
No,
better.
but you see, homework number 9 included discussion on all these control techniques, Nyquist plots, Bode plots, root locus, all three of them. And these are very important frequency domain design techniques. Okay, I cannot cut all of them. If you want, I can cut the root locus part. The stuff that I'm teaching today, I can remove that from the syllabus for the second midterm. But I want some frequency domain control techniques to be part of your examination. Okay, so we shall have Nyquist plots and Bode plots alone. Whatever I taught till last Thursday, so you would have almost 10 days or more for you to brush up on all of that. So only till that we shall have for the midterm. I can remove root locus if you wish, if you would like me to do so. I don't want to remove all of the homework 9 from being part of the second midterm. Okay.
Yes, sir. It will also be better. No problem.
Okay, so it's only root locus alone will not be examined, but all other controls concepts till Bode plot based control system design will be part of the midterm. So Yogesh has a comment.
Yes, sir. So actually, sir, they will have their exam from 19th. Okay. So what is happening that on Monday they gave this assignment 7th, I guess. Now I think next they will give 8th. So for 9th they are not having the proper deadline, I guess, so that they can submit, or because it is in between their exam period. It's not that is the problem. So maybe they can submit after exam or something. We can
that is not a problem for me. That is not a problem for me. Okay, but I would like them to submit before the exam so that they have an opportunity to practice the questions. I mean, the whole point of a homework is for you to become familiar with the kind of problems that might appear in the final examination, as well as become more familiar with the stuff that was taught. Okay, so if they submit the homework, let us say after the final examination, after 30th, and they have not solved the problems before that, they wake up on the previous day and then they try to solve these problems and they don't know how to do it, then they will panic, which is why I don't want the deadline to be after 30th. We can have it as 29th. I have no problems. Okay, instead of 25th or 26th, we can have it as 29th. As close to the final exam as possible is okay with me, but not after the final exam.
Yeah, then that is fine.
Okay. All right. So let us get started.
And sir,
with
for the next Thursday, there will be classes or there will not?
So you conduct this homework session on Thursday?
Sir, it would be better if you take
yes,
one doubt session.
I'll conduct, no problem. If you are not having any class, then I can conduct.
No, I will not. This will be my last class. This is what I have planned. Okay, I would like this to be my last class. So,
sir, it will be if you take one doubt session of whole means the whole control and the dynamics part after we finish the whole syllabus, so it will be better.
Yogesh will do it, sir, and if there are any further questions, you can come.
Sir, like they were also discussing with me. So like Thursday, maybe half an hour or 1 hour, you can means like clear their doubts, because because it will be for whole year, means what you have you taught, they will ask from that, and whatever homework and all is there and other doubts, I will take another session, and then like multi-body problem and all I will take in this week, so that I will handle. So maybe Thursday we can have one more class of half an hour or 1 hour.
But how can we cover the whole syllabus on Thursday? When what is coming
not whole syllabus, they are having some small doubts like conceptual doubts and all that. How much we can at least.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I can show up on Thursday and I can answer questions. And Yogesh over. So homework solutions and so on, Yogesh will take over. But at 10 o'clock I will show up, and Yogesh can ask me whatever you have. Yogesh will take over and discuss solutions to homework. Is that fine?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay. Yeah. Fine. So let me now share the presentation. Can you guys see my sheet of paper? I'm assuming that you can. So I will get started. So the topic for today's lecture is root locus. Okay. So let us briefly recap what we discussed in the previous lecture. So in the previous lecture, we undertook a complete control system design. We undertook complete control system design, and we started off before we launched on the design by quantifying the extent of stability of our feedback system, and we had to quantify this extent of stability not with our knowledge of the roots of the closed loop system, because that is something that we don't know, but instead with just given the structure of the open loop transfer functions. And to quantify that, we had these two quantities which were called the gain margin and the phase margin. And in fact, we saw that for fairly small values of the damping factor, there is a direct correlation between the phase margin and the closed loop damping factor. Okay, so if the closed loop system is modeled approximately as a second order system, then there's a direct correlation between the phase margin and the damping factor of that approximate second order system. Okay, then we undertook control system design using Bode plots.
Sir, your voice is cutting in between.
Okay, I don't know. I mean, it must be. Are others also facing the same issue, or am I audible
Yes,
to
sir.
others?
Yes, sir. You're also
Yes, sir. There is issue, sir.
Okay, then I will try to log off and log back in. Okay. Hello, I have logged back in. Is my voice stronger now? Is the connection better?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Yes. So we discussed control system design using Bode plots, and then we saw how Bode plots allow us to design a control system in a very user-friendly and transparent manner, because we can quantify the extent of improvement that occurs as a consequence of our controller structure directly by looking at the Bode plot. So the extent of disturbance rejection that we would have, or the extent of tracking error that we would have. Everything is apparent from the gain of the open loop system, and that is apparent in the Bode plot. Okay, so we undertook that design, and I think that was where we stopped in the previous lecture. So we just completed that design, and we noticed that as a guiding principle, you should first take care of performance specifications first. So even when you have multiple performance specifications, try to take care of all of them, and subsequently pay attention to the stability, and then fix the stability at the very end. Sometimes the stability specification will not be given to you because your employer would be interested in performance, not in stability, in which case, as a responsible control engineer, it is your duty to pick a certain appropriate stability margin, may it be phase margin or gain margin, and go about accomplishing that particular margin. Okay. Then ultimately we saw that the design of a controller is not unique, which is the way it ought to be. Any design problem doesn't have necessarily, or in most cases, a unique solution. It's sometimes some solutions are better than others from practical perspective, although from a theoretical perspective, they may not make much of a difference. Okay, so I also outlined one alternate controller structure, which ended up satisfying the specifications that we had, just as the first one did. Okay, so I'll just make note of that also. Okay, controller design does not have a unique solution. So this is where I want to also emphasize that on many occasions, especially at the undergraduate level, control system design is reduced to a monotonous, boring exercise in algebra. So you are asked to pick a certain controller structure. It could be a PID controller or some such other controller, and you are just asked to fix the parameters of that controller. It could be the locations of the poles or zeros, or it could be the controller gain, in order for the overall system to satisfy a certain set of performance specifications. Okay, well, this simply boils down to applying certain formulae in order to that connect the given performance specifications to the locations of these pole zeros or the values of these gains, and solving some algebraic equation to get the answer. Well, in the real world, things are a little different, and things are a little more interesting as well as a little bit more challenging. So, for example, in the previous class, if you noticed, I did not assume that I'm going to go with a PID controller or a PI controller ahead of time. Okay, that emerged organically as a consequence of the decisions that we had to take at every step during the design process. Okay, so we had to first take care of perfect tracking at steady state references, and that automatically meant that we had to have an integrator as part of our structure. Then we had to have a certain performance specification up to 5 radians per second, which automatically required us to crank up the gain of this budding controller. Okay, it was the controller structure had not yet been finalized, but it was growing, and we saw that we had to amplify its gain by a factor 25 or some such thing. Then we saw the phase and saw that the phase was not good enough, and then we realized that a zero placed close to the gain crossover frequency has the effect of boosting up phase without significantly affecting gain. So we therefore added that zero with a very specific intention of only boosting up the phase. And that resulted in this particular controller structure, which ended up being a PI controller. Okay, so this is the recommended approach to design. You use common sense, you look at the problem at hand, you use common sense, and then you come up with a controller that satisfies those performance requirements, rather than reducing it to a very boring problem in algebra. Okay, so with that, we shall discuss today's topic, the root locus. So one of the lacunae, one of the few lacunae of the frequency domain based design techniques that we have been discussing so far is its inability to tell us where the closed loop poles of the system are. Okay, so partially these notions of gain crossover frequency and phase margin address that shortcoming. So we discussed that as long as our phase margin is around 30 degrees or 40 degrees or so, that you can approximately model the closed loop system as a second order system, not exactly, only approximately. And for that approximate system, there is a relationship between the dominant poles of that approximate second order system and these notions of phase margin and the notion of gain crossover frequency. Okay, so only a pair of poles, so the open loop systems, Nyquist plot or Bode plot, give us some information about the dominant poles of the closed loop system, but none of the other poles. Okay, so this is a shortcoming. You may argue that it's not a very big shortcoming because what is important from the point of view of the response of the dynamic system, the overall closed loop system, are its dominant poles and not so much the other poles. But nevertheless, it's worthwhile to be able to keep track of where all the other poles are. Okay, and I will give you some examples in today's lecture to underscore the utility of being aware of where all the other poles are. And the stability question, is answered much better using root locus compared to Bode plots, and therefore root locus very nicely complements Bode plots. So Bode plots are very useful from the point of view of performance. Okay, to make sure that you have a certain gain in a certain frequency range, because a frequency range is where your disturbance affects you or whatever. You can very clearly see what the gains are using the Bode plot and make appropriate corrections to the existing gain if you are not meeting the required specifications. But stability, yes, you can tell whether if it is stable or not, but that's about it. Okay, you cannot tell where all the closed loop poles are. Root locus, however, addresses this lacuna. It tells you exactly where all the closed loop poles are. Okay, but it assumes a certain structure for the open loop system. So let us get started with that structure. Okay, suppose you have a transfer function g of s. Okay, and it is controlled by a proportional gain k. Okay, of course, you might think that this is overly restrictive, but we will see that this is not really as restrictive as it appears from this schematic. Suppose this was the case. Okay, you have a feedback system with a transfer function g of s controlled by a proportional controller k. Notice that I have deliberately not labeled this as the plant p of s. Okay, it is not just the plant. It's a different animal compared to p of s. What it is will become apparent later in the class. But there is a transfer function g of s and there is a gain k. Okay, so this is a feedback system. There is a reference r, there is the output y, etc., etc. Okay, the closed loop transfer function between y and r is given by k times g by 1 plus k times g. Okay, so now let us focus on the denominator polynomial, the denominator transfer function, which is 1 plus k times g, right? So the zeros of the denominator transfer function will be the poles of the closed loop system. Now, root locus essentially answers this question as to where all these zeros of 1 plus k times g lie when the gain k of this proportional controller is varied. Okay, so when you let gain k range from 0 to infinity, okay, how do the poles of the closed loop system, which are the zeros of the transfer function 1 plus k times g, how do they wander about in the complex plane? That's what root locus is all about. That's essentially the root locus of the system. Okay, so any questions about this definition? Okay, this definition is not mathematically very useful because just stating this fact that we are just keeping tabs on where all the roots of 1 plus k times g, all the zeros of 1 plus k times g exist as this gain k. It's like a knob. I change the knob to and allow it to assume values from 0 to infinity. As that gain is changed, where do all the closed loop poles go about? This is okay, but it doesn't help us to determine where all these poles are likely to lie. Okay, a slightly more useful mathematical definition will follow next. Okay, after which there are a set of rules for drawing the root locus. I shall only remind you of these rules because root locus again is a topic which you must have come across in your undergrad. So I'm just here to refresh your memory about how to draw the root locus of a certain transfer function. And then we will jump on to what its utility is. That's what I'm more interested in conveying to you. What its utility is from the point of view of analysis and from the point of view of design. Okay, so for a point S to be a point on the root locus, or for it to be a root or a 0 of 1 plus k times g, by definition that point S, or I'll call that point S naught, has to satisfy this equation by definition, right? For S naught to be a 0 of 1 plus k times g, 1 plus k times g of S naught has to be equal to 0. Or in other words, k should be equal to or g of S naught has to be equal to minus 1 by k. Okay, so k is a real number, as you can see from here. Okay, real positive number. Okay, so I can write this as 1 by k e to the power minus j pi, right? Because minus 1 by k, when I write it in the form r e to the power j theta, that magnitude of that complex number will be 1 by k, and its phase will be equal to minus pi. Of course, its phase could also be plus pi, which are cyclically equivalent. So I can even write this as 1 by k e to the power minus j minus pi plus or minus 2 pi n, where n can assume values of 0, 1, 2, etc., etc. Okay. So what this indicates, therefore, is that for a point S naught to be a root or a 0 of this particular transfer function 1 plus k times g, the angle of g of S naught has to be equal to minus pi or its cyclic equivalents, etc., etc. So this is a very useful mathematical definition. Okay, so all those points S naught in the complex plane. So if I were to hunt for the roots of or the zeros of 1 plus k times g, then this is the real part of S, this is the imaginary part of S. I just pick any particular point here and I compute the angle of g of S naught. Okay, so this is some S naught, let us say. I compute the transfer function, so I compute g of S naught, and then from that its angle, and I check whether the angle is minus pi or its cyclic equivalent. If it is, then this is a point on the root locus. Okay, if not, then it is not. Okay, so an alternate and a mathematically more useful definition for the root locus is that the root locus is the set of points in the S plane, okay, for which angle of g of S is equal to minus pi plus or minus 2 pi n, where n goes to, where n can assume integer values 1, 0, 1, etc., positive integers, because we already have plus minus here. Any questions about this definition of the root locus? Okay, so before outlining the rules for drawing the root locus of a given transfer function g of S, I want to first discuss the a geometric interpretation of g of S, okay, which will help in searching for those points S naught. Okay, so what is g of S? It's a transfer function of a physical system. So it is usually a ratio of two polynomials, some constant times s power m plus maybe bm minus 1 sm minus 1 or whatever, maybe bm. That's what we had earlier, right? This was a structure divided by s power n plus a1 s power n minus 1, etc., up to an. Okay, this was a structure. Now I can always factorize this. So since the degree of the numerator polynomial is m, I will have m factors, s plus z1, etc., up to s plus zm. Okay, divided by, there will be similarly n factors for the denominator. Okay, which is going to be s plus p1, etc., up to s plus pn. Okay, there may be some constant also. I'm not sure if that is necessary or not. Maybe, let me, for the sake of completeness, add some constant kg or something. Okay, so this is going to be the structure of the transfer function. I may not know z1, zm, etc. ahead of time if I have modeled my system as a ratio of two polynomials. But it remains a fact that if it is a ratio of two polynomials, I can always factorize those polynomials, and depending on their degree, I will have the number of factors will depend on the degree of the polynomial. So if it's m, then I'll have m factors. If it's n here, I'll have n factors. Okay. So let us now come back to the complex plane. Let us look at any one of these things. Let us focus on z1. Okay. So let me mark out z1 in the complex plane. So this is a real part of S. This is an imaginary part of S. Okay. So z1, let us say, is somewhere here. I mark it out with a circle. So this is S is equal to minus z1 is the location of the 0 of this transfer function. Okay. Now let this be some point S in the complex plane. Some point S. Okay. So this is the phasor S. This is minus z1. So what have you to say about this complex, not phasor? This is a complex number S. This is the complex number minus z1. So what have you to say about this complex number, which starts, whose end is at minus z1 and the tip is located at S? What is that value? Do you agree with me that this complex number is just S plus z1? Because this complex number plus that complex number is this complex number, right? So this complex number is minus z1, and if that complex number is S plus z1, then you will see that the summation of the two will give me S, right? So this complex number is therefore S plus z1. Now, why is this important? Because it is this interpretation of this graphical interpretation of g of s is important, because the angle of g of s, if you see, is the angle of s plus z1 plus the angle of s plus z2, etc., etc. In other words, summation of the angles of s plus zi, where I goes from 1 to m, minus the summation of the angles of s plus pi, where I goes from 1 to n. Okay, maybe I'll put this as pj. Okay, this is going to be the angle of g of s, and this is the one that we are keeping track of for determining whether a point S is a point on the root locus or not, right? So what this tells me, therefore, is that the phase of g of s is the algebraic sum of the phases of all these different complex numbers, s plus z1, s plus z2, etc., and s plus p1, s plus p2, and so on. Okay, so what is the angle of s plus z1? It's nothing but the angle that this complex number makes with the real axis, theta 1. Okay, so, or maybe I'll call it theta z1. So there is this nice geometric interpretation that if I have, let us say, these n poles, let me, for the sake of illustration, indicate p1 also here. Okay, the angle theta p1 is going to be this one. Okay, so I will have theta z1 minus theta p1 plus etc. These angles should all sum up to minus pi or its cyclic equivalent for the point S to be a point on the root locus. Okay, so this is a very important realization which we will put to good use when we are undertaking design. using root locus. Okay. Any questions about this interpretation of the angle of g of s, this graphical interpretation? So if I locate the open loop poles and zeros of my transfer function g of s, I mean, my transfer function itself is an open loop transfer function. So if I locate its poles and zeros and then do the algebraic sum of the angles subtended by those open loop poles and zeros at this location, yes. Okay. The angle subtended with respect to the real axis. Then that sum has to be equal to minus pi or its cyclic equivalents for that point S to be a point on the root locus, or for that point S to be the root of, or the zero of 1 plus k times g for some particular value of k. Any questions about this assertion? Okay. So if there are no questions, then I shall make a remark before writing down the rules of drawing the root locus. Okay. The remark is that if you look at the way we have represented the transfer function here, s plus z1, s plus z2, s plus p1, and so on. This is markedly different from the way we represented transfer functions when we were doing Bode plot based design. So there we wrote transfer functions as s by z1 plus 1, right? So for example, when we added that 0, we added it in this particular form. We added it as s by 50 plus 1, right? Similarly, other things were also written out in a manner that looked like this. Why did we do this in Bode plot based design? Whereas why are we going with this particular form in root locus based design? We did this because we wanted a term like this to only affect phase and not affect magnitude. Okay, so that was why we introduced terms of this kind when we did Bode plot based design. Whereas here, of course, these are equivalent. I can always write s by 50 plus 1 as s plus 50 divided by 50. I can always do that. They're equivalent representations. But it is convenient and useful to represent a transfer function in this form when we do Bode plot based design, because if it is represented in this form, for frequencies less than the corner frequency, which is in this case 50 radians per second, the Bode plot of this term will have 0 dB gain. Okay, it will be coincident with the x-axis, and then it will drop off beyond the corner frequency at whatever minus 20 decibels per decade. Okay, so that's the reason why we want it to be represented in this particular form. Here, however, we choose to represent it in this particular form, s plus z1. So if I were to represent it in using when I was doing design using root locus, I would represent this as s plus 50. Why would I do that here? That's because you see, this term s plus z1 has a definite physical meaning in this complex plane. S plus 50 represents this particular complex number if this point was minus 50. Okay, so since it has a very definite geometric interpretation in the complex plane, I choose to go with this kind of representation when I am trying to do analysis or design using root locus. Okay, so just I just wanted to note this difference in the way we represent the terms. They're all equivalent. I can always write it one way or another. It's just more convenient and less confusing to write this transfer function in a certain form when we are doing design or analysis using Bode plots vis-a-vis the root locus. Okay, so with this we shall briefly go over the rules of drawing the root locus. Okay. Okay. So the first rule, actually I have called it rule 0 here because it is so trivial, and I had already written up a bunch of rules and I discovered this is important, but nevertheless it may be trivial but nevertheless important, so I just called it as rule 0 in my notes. Okay, so in general, if the degree of the denominator of g of s is n, okay, So if there are if the degree of the denominator of g of s is n, then the denominator of 1 plus k times g will also have a degree n, right? So what that indicates therefore is that the transfer function 1 plus k times g will in general have n zeros. Okay, because I can write this as, if let us say g is some numerator polynomial by denominator polynomial, okay, then I can write 1 plus k times g as numerator of plus k times, sorry, d of s plus k times n of s divided by d of s, right? So the number of zeros will be determined by the higher of the two degrees here, and d of s has a degree n, whereas n of s is a degree m. And as we discussed, for a causal transfer function, m is always less than or equal to n. Therefore, this will have a degree n. So there are n zeros for this particular transfer function, or n closed loop poles. Okay. Now, when this gain k is changed, every one of these closed loop poles will wander in its own particular way in the complex plane, and therefore will trace its own particular trajectory. Okay. Hence, if you have an open loop system of order n, you will have n branches to the root locus. Okay, because root locus essentially, a trajectory of all these poles as this gain k is varied, right? So if the degree of the denominator polynomial of g of s is n, then there are n branches to the root locus. Each branch chronicles the way k, the way a particular pole, closed loop pole, varies as the gain is changed. Okay, then rule 1. Okay, so we see here that the closed loop transfer function. So we look at this again. Okay, 1 plus k times g is of the kind d of s plus k times n of s divided by d of s, right? So as k tends to 0, you notice that the zeros of this transfer function will simply be the zeros of d of s, because as k tends to 0, this term weighs down the numerator polynomial so heavily that for all practical purposes, the zeros of this will simply be the zeros of d of s alone. Okay, so as k tends to 0, the closed loop poles of the system will approach the open loop poles of the system. The poles of the closed loop system will approach the poles of the open loop system when k is exceedingly small, or in other words, when k is tended to 0. Likewise, as k tends to infinity, what happens? So I can just bring k out of this equation. I can write this as d of s by k plus n of s. Okay, divided by d of s. What happens to the zeros of this polynomial as k tends to infinity? You see that a very similar thing happens, but this time with this particular term here. Because d of s gets weighted down heavily by this term k as k is tended to infinity, the root locus, the zeros of the open loop system are the ones into which the root locus would sink. Okay, so the root locus would approach the zeros of the open loop system, which are the zeros of n of s, as k is tended to infinity. Okay, however, in general, you don't have as many zeros as you have poles. So we saw examples of that in the previous lecture. So those that do not sink into these zeros escape to infinity. Okay, so let us just put it out here. So the branches of the root locus start at the open loop poles of the system, in this case g of s, okay, and end in the open loop zeros. So start and end is dependent on how you are changing k. As you increase k k from 0 to infinity, then the closed loop poles start in the vicinity of open loop poles, and some of them end up in the open loop zeros, some others escape to infinity. Okay, so those that do not end in zeros escape to infinity. Okay, along asymptotes, which we will talk about in a minute. Okay, then rule number 2. Okay, where all can root locus exist on the real axis? Okay, to answer this question, you can once again just look at the definition of root locus. So if these are, let us say, the open loop poles, okay, and I pick a point S here, and I pick a point, let me first pick that point S to the right of all of them. Okay, then the angle subtended at that point S by this open loop pole, the first open loop pole P1, is 0. The second open loop pole is also 0. The third open loop pole is also 0. So you come up with, therefore you discover this very powerful fact that G of S cannot have its 1 plus k times G of S cannot have its zeros anywhere to the right of P1. Okay, whereas if the point S was here, no matter what k I pick, as long as k is positive, I cannot have a closed loop pole to the right of P1, because the angle criterion is violated for all such points S that I pick to the right of P1. Whereas if that point S that I have picked is somewhere between the first pole and the second pole, okay, then the first pole, so S plus P1 ends up being this complex number, starting at P1, ending at S. And the angle of that is going to be therefore equal to pi or minus pi, whichever way you want to look at it. Okay, whether you label it this way or that way. Okay, whereas the other poles, so S plus P2, S plus P3, these are all complex numbers which subtend an angle 0 at this point. Okay, so therefore the net angle here will become equal to pi, and this satisfies that condition for this point S to be a point on the root locus. Okay, so on the basis of this kind of an argument, you can generalize this a little bit further and come to the conclusion that on the real axis, the root locus exists in regions which have an odd number of poles plus zeros to their right. Okay, so if I pick this region, to its right there were no poles or zeros, so therefore it couldn't exist here. If I pick this particular point that I just now considered, okay, I had one pole here, and therefore I could have the root locus existing there, and so on and so forth. Okay, so if I had one more zero, however, then I would have an even number of poles plus zero, because I have one pole and one zero. Totally, it is pole plus zero is going to be 2, and therefore this cannot be a point on the root locus, because the angle subtended by the pole gets cancelled by the angle subtended by the zero. So you need to have an odd number of poles plus zeros for the root locus to exist in a certain region on the real axis. Any questions so far? Okay. The third rule, rule 3. Those branches that do not end in open loop zeros go towards infinity. How do they go towards infinity? That's the question that we want to answer here. Okay, so let us conduct this, let us look at this again. So you have a certain set of open loop poles and zeros. Maybe you have a pair of complex conjugate zeros, some 2 or 3 poles, etc., etc. Now, if I were to sit at a point here S, which is very far away from this collection of poles and zeros. Do you agree with me that the angle subtended by every one of these poles and zeros at this location is going to be nearly the same? The angle subtended by this pole is going to be very nearly the same as the angle subtended by that pole and that pole and that zero and that zero, right? So if I'm therefore very far away from the origin or from the collection of these poles and zeros of the open loop system, then if I have m zeros and n poles, to me it will appear as though I only have n minus m poles. Is that clear? This is because, let us say I take this angle to be theta. Okay. Now each of these poles subtend very nearly the same angle theta at this far away point S. Okay. So how many poles there are? There are 3 poles. So I will have 3 times theta. Okay. And since poles appear in the denominator, the actual angle has to be multiplied with -1. So minus 3 times theta is the angle subtended by all these 3 poles put together. How many zeros do I have? I have 2 zeros. And each of them also subtend the same angle very nearly at this far away point S. So I will have 2 times theta as the net angle subtended by the 2 zeros. So the net angle subtended therefore by the combination of 3 poles and 2 zeros is 2 theta minus 3 theta, which is equal to minus theta. Okay. Therefore, this combination of, more generally, this combination of n poles and m zeros behave as though you only have n minus m poles, right? So if I had, instead of 2 zeros and 3 poles, if I had just 1 pole, even that would have subtended the same angle, minus theta. And that's exactly what we are seeing here, right? So therefore, for those faraway points which are on root loci which are tending to infinity, I need to still satisfy the angle criterion. So n minus m times theta, okay, should be equal to minus pi or its cyclic equivalents. Okay, so the angles along which the root locus escapes to infinity are given by theta equal to minus pi plus minus 2 pi n divided by n minus m. Okay, so if angle theta is a constant, that implies that this point S will lie on a straight line. Okay, so all these therefore all these root loci which are tending to infinity will asymptotically approach these straight lines of theta equal to some constant given by this particular expression. Okay, so there are many possible values of theta. If I change this, I think there's an abuse of notation here. Let me call this L or something. Okay, the cyclic equivalent. So L can go, L can assume values of 0, 1, 2, etc., etc. So as I permit L to assume different values, I get different values of theta. And each of those theta equal to constant straight lines are the ones to which the root loci will asymptotically approach as k tends to infinity. Okay, any questions about this? Okay, now it turns out that you can show that these straight lines intersect, these asymptotes intersect at a certain point. I shall state this without proving it. The point of intersection is given by S naught is equal to minus sigma pi. So it's like the center of mass in some sense, minus sigma pi plus sigma zi divided by n minus m. This is the location at which all these asymptotes intersect. Okay, this fact is not very useful, but the other one is definitely useful, but I'm stating this for the sake of completeness. Okay, then the last rule which I would put out here, there are many more which you can use to draw the root loci, but I'll stop with just one more rule and we'll see how we can use this for design purposes. So rule 4. Okay, so let us say I have root locus. We know that root locus will exist in this part of the complex plane if these are the 2 open loop poles of my system. Okay, so I will have one branch starting here, another branch starting there. Okay, now at some point on the root locus, they on the real axis they collide. Okay, what do you mean by they collide? For that particular value of the gain k, the closed loop pole associated with this branch will be the same as the closed loop pole associated with that branch. So you will have repeated roots at the points of repeated poles of the closed loop system at the points of collision. Okay, so you can determine where exactly the root loci collide by solving a particular algebraic equation. Okay, I shall state again this rule without forwarding a formal proof. It's a fairly straightforward proof, but I don't want to do it now. So these are called breakaway points because they collide here and then they break away into the complex plane. Okay, so these are called breakaway points, and similarly it is possible for the root locus to break back in. Okay, so these are these points at which they enter back into the real axis or break away from the real axis are called breakaway and break-in points. So the points on the real axis at which the root loci break away or break in are obtained by solving the algebraic equation dn by ds times capital D of S minus dd by ds times capital N of S is equal to 0. So if I write my g of s as we did before as numerator polynomial divided by denominator polynomial, I differentiate the numerator polynomial with respect to s. So I get a certain other polynomial. I multiply that with d. Similarly, I differentiate d with respect to s. I get a certain polynomial. I multiply that with n. The difference between these two will be a third polynomial. That polynomial has to be, if I set that equal to 0 and determine the roots of that polynomial, those will be the potential points at which the root locus can break away or break in. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay.
Sir, what is hello, sir?
Hello. Yes.
Sir, what is the significance of that colliding and
So the significance is that these are points at which you would have repeated roots for your, for the zeros of repeated zeros for your closed loop for this transfer function 1 plus k times g. Okay, so whether it be the breakaway point or the break-in point, these will be the points at which 1 plus k times g will have repeated zeros. Okay,
and that is for the particular value.
Pardon me?
Sir, that is for the particular value of k, right?
Correct. Correct. So there will be a particular value of k for which you will have repeated roots, and those will be the collision points. Okay, those will be the values of k at which the two branches collide, and then that causes the root locus to break away or break in. Okay, so to determine those points at which they collide, you have to solve this equation. Once you have obtained that, you can determine the gain k by substituting 1 plus k times s naught is equal to 0. You can determine the gain k at which the collision happens by solving this standard root locus equation. Okay. So let us now briefly take a look at the root loci of some standard transfer functions before seeing how we can use it for analysis and design. So I hope all of you are able to see my screen. Just a moment. Okay, so this transfer function is s plus 1 by s plus 2. So it has a 0 at -1 and a pole at -2. So the root locus starts at that pole. So these are all drawn using using MATLAB, by the way. So the command R locus helps you to draw the root locus of a certain transfer function. So it starts at the 0 and ends in the starts at the pole and ends in the 0. Okay, so there are no branches here that escape to infinity because here n and m are both equal to each other and both are equal to 1. Okay, next I have a second order system 1 by s square plus 3s plus 2. If I were to factorize the denominator polynomial, I'll see that the roots are at -1 and -2. Okay, so here the root locus starts from these two open loop poles, -1 and -2, and they collide in between them exactly at -1.5, and then they escape to infinity along two straight lines which are perpendicular to the real axis. You can show formally that this is how it has to be. Okay, then there is again a second order system, but this time with a 0. Okay, so P of s is equal to s plus 5 divided by s square plus 5s plus 4. So if I factorize a denominator polynomial, I will see that it has its poles. The open loop poles are at -1 and -4. Okay, so the root locus starts at these open loop poles and it collides somewhere midway between them. It's not going to be exactly at the center between -1 and -4 as it happened in the previous case. It's going to be somewhere else. Okay, and then they break away into the complex plane, and then they break back in. You see, you have the degree of the numerator polynomial is 1. The degree of the denominator polynomial is 2. Therefore, one of these branches sinks into the 0, and the other branch escapes to infinity. So you will have one branch which will escape to infinity, and the other branch will be sinking to 0. So what happens here is that they will break away and then break back into the real axis. One of them ends up in the 0, the other escapes to infinity. Okay, along the negative real axis. Then I have one last transfer function here. So s plus 1 times s plus 2 times s plus 3. Okay, so this has 3 poles. So 3 open loop poles, -1, -2, and -3. So I will have 3 branches to the root locus. Now there are no zeros for this particular transfer function. So all 3 of these branches will escape to infinity. Okay, but they will approach asymptotes which satisfy that equation that I indicated earlier. Okay, it turns out that the angles theta will be equal to ±π/3 or -π in this particular case. So what you see therefore is that, for example, the branches which are colored green and blue, which are starting at -2 and -1, they collide somewhere along the real axis, and one of them escapes to infinity along a straight line which is tilted at an angle of +60 degrees to the x-axis. The other one escapes to infinity along a straight line which is tilted at -60 degrees. And the third, root locus, the third branch, which is the red branch here, starts at the point -3 and escapes to infinity along the negative real axis. Okay, it turns out that it is fairly straightforward. Even though the exact shapes are difficult to obtain, you can quickly sketch the general appearance of root loci with some practice. Okay, and that itself often gives very useful information for a control designer. It may not be quantitatively very useful, but qualitatively very useful from the point of view of analysis. So what I shall do therefore is take a few such examples. Okay, some 2 or 3 examples where root locus can help with analysis. And then we'll undertake a design problem, a simple design problem. Okay, so let me just call this use of root locus for analysis. Okay, so one of the challenges associated with control of a dynamic system is to achieve good control in the presence of when you are given an unstable system. Okay, so let us take, for example, a plant P of s which is unstable, 1 by s minus 2. Okay, so the transfer function has its pole at s is equal to +2, which is on the right half of the complex plane, and therefore the mode associated with that is e to the power 2t, which blows up as time t goes to infinity, right? So this is an unstable system. Now, so this is a system that I need to control, let us say. I very naively come up with a suggestion. Why don't I simply cancel the pole, the unstable pole, with a 0? s minus 2, and then replace it with whatever other pole, a stable pole that I want. So let us say s plus 2 or some such thing. Okay, so this could be my controller C of s, this could be my plant P of s, and then if I were to close my system, I should be able to get a stable closed loop system, right? Because I've cancelled this unstable pole with S0, so they go away. So the overall open loop system is C of s times P of s is 1 by s plus 2, and that is supposed to be stable, right? What is wrong with this idea? There's one very simple way whereby you can use root locus to see what can possibly be wrong with this idea. Although on a piece of paper, it looks perfectly fair. So let us draw the complex plane, real part of S, imaginary part of S. We know where the plant's pole is located. I will place it here at plus 2. That's where the plant's pole is located. Now I want an open loop 0 to be located exactly at plus 2. But here is the rub. Can I position it exactly at plus 2? I mean, firstly, do I know the plant's pole itself to be equal to plus 2? I will know it only within the limits of my experimental error, right? I would have put together my plant using certain components, and I would have characterized the dynamics of the plant in a certain manner. There will be errors in all of these things. Okay, so it might be 2 point. I may know it to, let us say, 1% accuracy or something. Then it will be 2.00. It cannot be 2.00000000 all the way to infinity. So I don't know the exact position of the open loop system's pole. Okay, I know it only to a certain degree of accuracy. After which, after this two zeros, I don't know what the numbers may be. It could be 2.001 or 2.005 or some such thing. So there is some uncertainty associated with my knowledge of the location of the open loop pole itself. Okay, so suppose it is 2.005. So I thought it is 2, but it's not exactly 2, but that difference between 2 and its actual position is not something that my measurement system can capture. That's why it's actually 2.005, let us say. Now, thinking that it is at plus 2, I have introduced a 0, a controller 0 at exactly 2.000. Okay. Now, I had intended to cancel this pole, but I'm cancelling it not perfectly. I'm cancelling it imperfectly because the 0 is not sitting exactly on top of the pole and cancelling its effect. Okay, and this is a very common practical scenario. I can never exactly model a plant, right? Only a mathematician can talk of me knowing the pole location to the last decimal place. Okay, there's always uncertainty. That uncertainty is defined by our uncertainty about the mass, the stiffness, and so many other parameters that go into the construction of the physical system. So this is, I think it is 2, and therefore place a 0 in order to cancel the pole. But the pole is actually not at 2; it's slightly farther away. So small, it is divided by such a small extent I cannot capture that. Okay. But now that this is the pole 0 distribution of my open loop system, you see that there will be a branch of the root locus starting at this pole and ending in that 0. There will be this branch. So what do you mean when you say there will be that branch? When you say that there's a branch here, what I mean is that there will be a closed loop pole situated somewhere between these two. So for some value of the gain k, let us say I choose for my controller, let us say k is the gain of the controller times s minus 2 by s plus 2. For whatever value of gain that I pick, I will have the closed loop pole lying, one closed loop pole lying somewhere between this one and that one. Okay, now that closed loop pole you see is also on the right half of the complex plane. And therefore, I'm going to have an unstable closed loop system on my hands because of the presence of that right half plane closed loop pole. Okay, so here you see therefore root locus coming to use in analyzing a hypothetical controller which appears on a piece of paper to solve this problem, but in practice is going to mean disaster if you try to implement this control strategy. Okay, it is not at all clear from this how or why there would be problems. But the moment you take into account some error or uncertainty in our knowledge of the plant's pole, and then draw a realistic root locus, in one shot you see that there will be a branch of the root locus between the two, and that branch will contain in it, by definition, an unstable closed loop pole. And therefore, our system is going to be unstable if we use this apparently simple technique of cancelling the dynamics of an unstable plant using the controller's 0. Okay, so this is one example. Let us take a second example, again where root locus can be used for analysis. So let us say we have an undamped natural physical system. Okay, G of P of S is equal to 1 by S square plus 1. Okay. So where will the poles of this be? It will be at plus J and minus J. This will be the poles of the open loop system. What will the Bode plot of this plant look like? The P of J omega is equal to 1 by minus omega square plus 1. If I were to plot it, it will be nearly flat all the way up to omega equal to 1 radian per second. Near omega equal to 1 radian per second, there will be a resonant peak, and the peak will be infinitely tall because there is no damping in this particular second order system. And then for frequencies omega greater than 1, the magnitude plot will roll off at minus 40 decibels per decade. Now suppose, as a control engineer, I'm given this plant, and this plant has to perfectly track a steady reference. Then what do I need to do? To perfectly track a steady reference, I need to use an integrator, right? So I need to place a controller pole at S is equal to 0. That's an integrator, right? C of S is equal to 1 by S implies that the pole of this particular transfer function is at 0. Now, the question is whether this choice of the pole location, this choice of the controller, it satisfies for sure my performance requirement, namely of getting infinite gain at omega equal to 0 for steady references, or in other words, steady references, right? That's possible. That's achieved by this controller. But do I have a stable closed loop system or an unstable closed loop system on my hands? To answer this question, what do I need to do? If I was stuck with Bode plots and Nyquist plots, I have to plot the Nyquist plot for this particular transfer function. And my Nyquist contour cannot be the simple D-shaped contour, right? So I need to avoid the pole near the origin by a small d, another pole near plus j, similarly a pole near minus j. I need to make all these surgical modifications to the D-shaped contour, and then compute P of S times C of S for all other values of S, okay, or for values of S on this D-shaped contour with kinks, okay, and then obtain and then try to judge whether my closed loop system is going to be stable or not, looking at how many times that point minus 1 is encircled by the Nyquist plot. That is the way in which I would have to proceed if I was stuck with Nyquist plots. Now imagine the amount of work necessary, right? I have to define a complex number on each of these smaller d's. Then I have to compute each of these set S is equal to j omega at other locations. I have to do so many things, and this Nyquist plot also goes to infinity because these radii are tended to 0. So there are so many things that go into me being able to come up with the Nyquist plot of this particular transfer function. I can come up with it and I can use it, yes, to determine stability. But there's a lot of work that goes into it. If I want to quickly see whether this works or not, this idea works or not, I cannot do it quickly, okay? I need to put in quite a bit of effort before I'm able to judge. On the other hand, let us now solve the same problem using root locus, okay? So you have 3 poles. I have put the central controller pole to take care of the steady tracking performance requirement. How many open loop poles do I have? 3 open loop poles. How many zeros do I have? None. So this is real part of S, imaginary part of S. Okay. So how many branches of the root locus would I have? 3. What would be the, how would the branches tend to infinity along what asymptotes? Since I have 3 poles, they will tend to infinity along 3 straight lines at plus pi by 6 or plus 60 degrees, minus 60 degrees, and 180 degrees. Now, with very little, having internalized the rules of drawing the root locus, in one shot almost, I can sketch the root locus for this thing. I need to have a branch to the left of this integrator, right? Because on the real axis, the root locus exists when I have odd number of poles or zeros to the right of the root locus. And here I have one pole, so it is an odd number. So this is going to be the branch on the real axis. And I know that the branches start at the at the open loop poles, right? So I would have branches starting here, and I need to go along plus 60 degree and minus 60 degrees straight lines roughly. So these straight lines will be this at plus 60 degrees. If I were to extrapolate, this will be at minus 60 degrees. Of course, in the vicinity of these two poles, the shape of this might be different. It may not be straight line. If I go for sufficiently far away, they will look like straight lines tilted at plus minus 60 degrees. But that's not important for me at the moment. This rough shape is enough for me to make some important judgments, because let us take any value of gain k, small or large. Do you agree with me that for any particular value of gain k naught, I will have one pole, one closed loop pole here on one branch, one closed loop pole on the other branch, and a third closed loop pole on the third branch, right? So no matter what gain k naught I pick, you see from this root locus that no matter how small or large it is, I will always have one pair of poles on the right half of the complex plane. And therefore, no matter what gain I pick for my controller, I will have an unstable closed loop system on our hands. So it took me 1 second to draw this root locus, because I just need to internalize those rules of drawing it. The root locus may not be exact, so I have simply drawn it in a very casual manner. So the exact root locus may deviate somewhat from this, but the story does not change. The story remains that I will have a pair of poles no matter what gain k I pick on this branch, and those contribute to instability of my feedback system. Okay, so look at how quickly I could arrive at this result and compare it with how much effort I needed to put in the case of Nyquist plots and Bode plots. Okay, now third example. Many mechanical systems have both lightly damped poles as well as zeros. Okay, so let us say I have a pair of poles, okay, which are undamped, and then a pair of zeros just after them. Okay, so this is the pole zero distribution of my open loop system. Now, the question is, when I choose a certain controller, for example, an integrator or some such thing, what will happen to my closed loop system? Will it be unstable or stable? So this is a fairly complicated pole zero distribution. I have 2 imaginary zeros, 3 imaginary poles, or 3 poles on the imaginary axis. So it takes me quite a bit of effort to again, redefine those D contours to avoid these poles and zeros, and then subsequently plot the Nyquist plot, count the encirclements, and then conclude whether the system is going to be stable or unstable. Okay, but in root locus, just see how simple it can be. So this is real part of S, this is the imaginary part of S. Okay, how many open loop poles do I have? 3. How many open loop zeros do I have? 2. So how many of the branches will escape to infinity? Only 1. And I know that I will have a branch on the real axis to the left of this pole here. So that is the branch is going to tend to infinity. So that we have already discovered that in one shot. Okay, now we come close to this. Now, whether the root locus, of course, I know that the root locus will start here and end here. Okay, but how will it go? Will it go like this on the imaginary axis? Will it go like that? Or will it go like this? How do I know in what way it will go? To answer this question, I conduct a simple thought experiment. I take a point S somewhere near this pole. What is the angle subtended by this open loop 0 at this point S? Okay, that angle is minus pi by 2. Okay, what is the angle subtended by this? No, it's not minus pi by 2. It is some angle greater than pi by 2. Okay, likewise, this angle is also going to be greater than pi by 2. And These guys are very far away from that point, yes, right? So their subtended angle is close to 0, right? So I know therefore that I can't have the root locus on this side, okay, because the angle criterion will not be met. This angle will also be greater than pi by 2. That angle will also be greater than pi by 2. The other angles are all close to 0. Similar argument also holds for the other branch here. So what I conclude therefore is that the root locus has to be straight. Okay. So, or in other words, my closed loop system will have a pair of imaginary poles as a consequence of this particular pole zero distribution. Now, this would have taken me quite a bit of effort to conclude if I had to use Nyquist plots, but I could do it in a very straightforward manner by drawing the root locus of that open loop system. So hopefully these examples have illustrated to you the usefulness of root locus as a tool for analysis. Okay, you have a controller structure which you think satisfies performance specifications, but you are of course concerned about stability. So you want to quickly check whether the overall system would be stable or not. Then your first attempt should be to draw the root locus of that open loop system to check how the root locus might look like, and that may immediately reveal to you any problems with stability that there might exist or how to avoid those problems. Okay, so the last part, I am nearly out of time, but since this would be the last lecture, I don't want to drag the subject to one more lecture next time. I will take 10 more minutes and then discuss how to use root locus as a tool for design. So suppose I am given a plant. I shall take a plant P of S is equal to 1 by S plus 1 times S plus 2 times S plus 3. Okay. I shall indicate the locations of these poles is -1, -2, -3. And I want this plant to have its dominant closed loop pole, which I shall call as PCL naught, to be at -1.5 plus minus 2j. Okay, that's where I want my dominant closed loop pole to be located. Okay. So I have to design a controller that makes sure that my dominant closed loop pole is located there. How do I solve this problem? Okay, so first, if I were to look at the root locus of just this alone, so I will have one branch starting from this point -1, another branch -2, they'll collide. There'll be a third branch starting at -3 that will escape to -infinity in this particular way. There'll be 3 branches, of course, and then this collided thing will go to plus, go to infinity along these asymptotes, which are tilted at ±60 degrees, as we have discussed before. Okay, so the point -1.5 plus 2j is located there, and the point -1.5 minus 2j is located here. You see, therefore, that the root locus is completely avoiding this both these points. Okay, what that means then is that if I have a simple proportional controller K, and I were to use that to control my plant P of S, which has this particular structure, okay, it is impossible for me to place the closed loop poles at the locations where I want them to be placed, namely -1.5 plus minus 2j. Why do I want the closed loop poles to be placed at a certain location? Because I want to be able to engineer the transient response of the closed loop system. I don't want it to oscillate too much. I don't want it to take too much time to settle down. So I have discovered, therefore, that this particular dominant pole location is ideal for my particular application. Now I want to design a controller which places the closed loop poles at that particular location. Okay. So now, since the root locus avoids this, it is not possible for the closed loop poles to be, for me to achieve these particular poles as a closed loop poles of my system. So what my controller has to do is 2 things. First, I have to choose the poles and zeros of my controller such that these roads here, these trajectories are modified, are bent in such a way that they now pass through these 2 points. That's the first thing that the controller has to do. And then the controller has to provide an appropriate amount of gain to be sure that the closed loop poles are situated exactly here. Okay, so we will do these two things one after another so that we see how we can use root locus for designing this particular controller. Okay, so what is the requirement for the root locus to pass through a particular point? That is the first thing, right? If a particular point has to be a closed loop pole, by definition, the root locus has to pass through that point. Now, for the root locus to pass through that point, what should happen? The angle of the open loop transfer function g of s has to be equal to minus pi. We'll forget about its cyclic equivalence for the moment. Okay, so what is the angle now? So this, if you see, is in between these 2 points. It's -2 here, -1 here. So the x coordinate here is minus. I mean the real part is -1.5. So it's exactly between these two. So this angle plus that angle should add up to -180 degrees at this location. It is now not adding up, and therefore this is not a point on the root locus, right? So what is the sum of these three angles? If I do that summation, if I compute tan inverse of some ratios, etc., to compute those three angles, θ1, θ2, θ3, I get θ1 plus θ2 plus θ3 with a minus sign because it's a pole. I get that to be equal to minus of 233 degrees. Okay. Yes, it is minus 233 degrees. I want it to be minus 180 degrees, but I actually am getting it to be minus 233 degrees. So what should I do? For this point to be a candidate to be a closed loop pole, I need this angle to be minus 180 degrees. So I need a controller which supplies to me a phase of plus 53 degrees. Right? So what do I need to do? If a controller, can be some factors, s plus z1, s plus p1, etc., etc. Now that whatever structure I pick for the controller should give me a phase of plus 53 degrees. So again, like any self-respecting engineer, I go with simplicity as my guiding principle. If I were to place a 0 somewhere here, such that this 0 subtends an angle of plus 53 degrees, I'm done, right? So if my controller structure C of S is of the kind S plus Z, where the angle of S plus Z is 53 degrees, I'm done, right? But there's a small problem. A controller cannot be of this particular form because a physical system has to have the denominator polynomial at least the same as the numerator polynomial's degree. Here the numerator polynomial is a degree of 1. There's no denominator polynomial at all. Or in other words, the degree of the denominator polynomial is 0. So that causality condition is violated by this controller structure. So I have to also choose a pole for this controller to satisfy causality. Now where would I place this pole? I don't want this pole to affect my angle too much. Wherever I place it, let us say I call this P. This pole also subtends a negative angle at this particular location, right? So that angle will change. That angle will add to the overall angle subtended by all the other open loop poles and zeros and will affect this number, will affect the algebraic sum. But nevertheless, I have no choice but to add a pole. So I choose to add it some distance away. Here, I have chosen to add it. I have the freedom to place it wherever I want, and I have chosen to place it at 11, minus 11. Okay, it's arbitrary. So my controller structure, which is still work in progress, is going to be of the form S plus Z divided by S plus 11. Okay. Now, what is the net angle subtended by all these open loop poles and zeros? 3 plant poles, 1 controller zero, 1 controller pole. What is the net angle subtended by all of them at this particular location? It turns out that the net angle is going to be equal to, so the zero subtended an angle of 53 degrees. So the net angle of the zeros and the poles already was equal to exactly minus 180 degrees. But because of the introduction of this new term, s plus 11, this new term subtends an extra angle of minus 12 degrees. Okay, at the location minus 1.5 plus 2j. So therefore, my net angle will be sigma theta I will be equal to minus 182 degrees, 192 degrees now, instead of being minus 180 degrees. Okay, so how do I fix this issue now? All I need to do is I need to adjust the location of the zero such that instead of it subtending 53 degrees at the location minus 1.5 plus 2j, if it subtends 53 plus 12 degrees, okay, which takes into account the phase deficit that has been supplied by this pole that I was forced to add to my controller, then the total angle subtended by all the poles and zeros of the controller and the plant put together will add up to minus 180 degrees. Okay, so the angle subtended by the term s plus z therefore has to be equal to plus 65 degrees. So that instead of plus 53 degrees, the tiny 12 degree angle had to be introduced to compensate for the angle subtended by this pole of the controller itself, namely s plus 11. Okay, now if I find out where the zero has to be located, so this should happen at s is equal to minus 1.5 plus 2j. So this is a simple equation. I can find out at what location z will the angle s plus z be equal to 65 degrees, and I find that to be s is equal to minus 2.44. That is where I need to locate my controller zero. Okay, so my controller structure now, which makes sure that this highway passes through my village, or in other words, the root locus passes through that point minus 1.5 plus 2j, is given by C of s is equal to s plus 2.44 divided by s plus 11. Okay, the angle subtended by this term at the point minus 1.5 plus 2j exactly balances the angle subtended by the plant itself in such a manner that the total angle now becomes minus 180 degrees. And now the root locus can pass through this particular location. Okay, but the root locus passing through the particular location does not guarantee that the closed loop poles will be situated at that location. So to make sure that the closed loop poles are situated also at that location, I need to choose the gain of the controller in such a manner that the root locus condition, maybe I'll call this Kc, 1 plus C of s times P of s, evaluated at the point s is equal to minus 2 plus or minus 2 plus 1 point, sorry, s is equal to minus 1.5 plus 2j has to be equal to 0. So this condition also needs to be, the magnitude condition also needs to be respected. Or in other words, Kc times s plus 2.44 divided by s plus 11 times 1 by s plus 1 times s plus 2 times s plus 3 evaluated at s is equal to minus 1.5 plus 2j should be equal to minus 1. Okay, so if I solve this equation, I will get Kc to be equal to 46.67. So the controller therefore is going to be equal to 46.67 times s plus 2.44 divided by s plus 11. Okay, this concludes the design. So let me show some root locus plots before and after to illustrate what we have achieved in the process of our design exercise. Okay, so this is the transfer function 1 by s plus 1 times s plus 2 times s plus 3, and you see it's avoiding the point minus 1.5 plus or minus 2j. Okay, then now I use this controller k times s plus 2.44 divided by s plus 11 with the gain k being 46.67, and you see that now the root locus has been modified, and this modified root locus now passes through those points, and for this particular value of gain the closed loop poles, one pair of closed loop poles will be situated exactly at those 2 points. There will be one more pair which will be situated at one other branch, but that pair, there will be two more closed loop poles. One on the branch that is to the left of -11, and one is on the branch that is in between -3 and -2.44. Okay, there's that red branch that you see in the root locus. But those two closed loop poles have the real parts larger than the real parts of these two poles, so they will not be the dominant poles. Okay, so dominant poles will therefore be these two ones at -1.5 plus -2j. And this concludes the design. Okay, so I will stop the class at this point. If you have any questions, you can ask me. Then next, I'll show up in the next class to answer any other questions you might have in connection with whatever has been taught in this course. And before we conclude, I just want to, on behalf of Professor Ghoshal also, I want to thank the TA, Yogesh, who was very proactive and, on top of his job all the time, and was communicating very effectively with all of you. So Yogesh, I just want to thank him for all the help that he has rendered over this one semester. Likewise, Soumya Kanti took one lecture on Adams, and although we did not use it, it's a very useful software. You are encouraged to learn you're using that software. You also now have ways to download it for free of cost. So please make good use of that, of the software. I want to thank Soumya Kanti also for having given one lecture. And finally, an MTech student by name Rakesh, who used to log in every day to take attendance and help with other, administrative stuff in connection with this course. So I want to thank all these people on behalf of both Professor Ghoshal and myself. So Professor Ghoshal, do you want to add anything else?
No, thank you very much. So I hope you have learned something new in this course. And I also wish to thank Jayant for teaching this course. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks a lot, Professor Ghoshal. So once again, anyway, we'll be meeting one more time in the next class. But I request all of you to kindly, fill up the feedback forms for this course. So these are all done online now. So whatever feedback you give us will be of great use to us to know how we are doing and how we can improve the experience for the next batch of students. So thanks a lot. So Rushikesh has a question now. Yeah.
Sir, I am in my BTech course, there was no course regarding this part. So can you suggest a book to read from about this content?
I will send an email about that. Okay. There's a standard book that is used in undergrad, written by a person by name Ogata. That would be a good starting point for you to learn root locus. Are there any other?
I've shared them the soft copy of Ogata. I've shared them one link where there is a soft copy of Ogata.
Okay, so fantastic. Then Yogesh has already shared that with you, so you can look that up.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. Any other question?
There are just one more thing. There are soft copies of Franklin Powell also. It's on internet. It's a slightly older version, but that doesn't matter. So they can download.
Yeah. Good. Any other question or comment? Okay, if not, then I shall sign off at this point. Thanks a lot.
Jen, thank you very much.